Elite Dangerous has a lot of different ship-launched fighters, but which one is the best? Today's video is sponsored by SecretLab. We all strive for the best possible gaming experience, but the importance of a good quality chair is often underestimated. SecretLab produces some of the most comfortable and high quality gaming chairs you can get. So upgrade your Commander chair today and fly in style and comfort. Follow the link in the video description to their store, type in your height, your weight, and it will tell you which chairs fit you for the best possible seating experience. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Elite Dangerous without with Astronomy. Today we're going to be talking about ship-launched fighters. We're going to compare them, we're going to compare the weapon choices, and by the end of this video you're going to have all the information you need to make the decision which one fits your playstyle the best. First of all, you need to know that there is a number of base fighters, and some of these fighters then have variants upon them, and each variant that has a number of different weapon choices that then comes with different utilities, and all those combinations we're going to go over later on in the video. But first, I just want to go through the different fighter types and the variants. So first of all, we're going to look at the three base types. These are like the standard fighters. I figured this was the best place to start. We have the F-63 Condor, the GU-97, and we have the Taipan. If we're going to start with the Condor, it's the fastest of the three fighters when it comes to non-boosting. When you boost, it can boost up to 560, which is only exceeded by the Taipan boosting up to 570. Most people seem to think that the Imperial GU-95 is the fastest. It's actually not. It's the most maneuverable, but in a straight line, it's not the fastest. Despite what in-game stats might tell you, if you actually take the fighter out, fly it in space, put 4 pips to engines, and gun the throttle, you will see that the Condor is actually faster. Continuing to look at the Condor, we can also see that this is kind of the middle of the road when it comes to maneuverability as well as defense. This comes in with 25 hit points of both shield and armor, giving it a total of 50 hit points before this thing goes down. The GU-97, while it's in the middle of the road when it comes to straight line speed, it is by far the most maneuverable. But that maneuverability, of course, comes at a cost, and that is its defense. Only 15 hit points with both shield and armor, giving it a total of only 30 hit points. Then we get to the Taipan, again, slowest of the three fighters without boosting, but if you hit that boost button, it's going to overtake everything else, and it's going to be the fastest fighter when boosting. It's also the least maneuverable of the three fighters. It's not that far behind the Condor, but it's definitely enough that you can feel it. To put this into perspective, a well-equipped Eagle, well-engineered, will be more maneuverable than the Taipan. So this is kind of just to put it in perspective. I know the Eagle is already a very maneuverable ship, but we're down into like small, fast, maneuverable ship territory here in case of its maneuverability. Its upside, of course, is its defense. If we look at that, we can see we had 30 hit points of shield and 45 hit points of armor, putting it well ahead of the two others in terms of survivability. So to summarize these three very quickly, if you want something that might feel a little heavy, a little less maneuverable, but can take a bit of damage, then go for a Taipan. If you plan to just outright use your maneuverability to avoid damage, go for the GU-97. And if you want something that's kind of the middle of the road, go for a Condor. These three fighters also come in a Aegis variant. This variant only has a single weapon option, which I will come back to later, but the base stats for them is pretty much the same as the other variants. Only difference is they are a little faster. So maneuverability is the same, shield, armor hit points is the same as their default variants, but they are a little faster and they also boost a little faster. So that's the only difference between the Aegis and the default variants. But of course we also have the three Guardian fighter variants, the Trident, the Javelin, and the Lance. When it comes to straight line speed and boost, they are very similar to the Condor, so kind of a middle of the road feel here. When it comes to its maneuverability, it is kind of like in the middle between the Condor and the GU-97. So it will be slightly higher than average for fighters, so it has a pretty good maneuverability. It's not GU-97 levels. However, its defense is quite interesting. It has 30 hit points of shield, just like you get on the Taipan, which we recall is the most heavily defended fighter. However, its armor is basically non-existent at only 10 hit points. That's lower than even the GU-97. So with the Guardian fighters, you get something that has, well, I would consider pretty average when it comes to speed and boost speed, a little bit better than average maneuverability, And the defense is kind of funny. The total hit points is lower than average, but the total shield hit points are quite high. But again, we're talking about very small numbers of hit points here. You really shouldn't expect to take a lot of damage in your fighters. If you're getting shot at, you're probably going to die pretty quickly. Now, there is one more fighter that I just want to mention. That is the Taipan AX1. This is a dedicated anti-Xeno fighter. Compared to the other Taipan variants, this is faster, both straight line and boost speed. It's still not up at the Condor levels. And maneuverability is also better than the two other variants of the Taipan, while the defense is the same. But since this is a dedicated AX fighter, it's kind of the odd one out in this comparison, so I'm not going to dive into too much detail with this from here on. I want to step away from the fighter hulls a bit, and I want to talk about the weapons. Now, I have all of them listed here, and as you can see, the majority of these are fixed weapons. It's only the beam laser and the pulse laser that does come in gimbaled variants. However, looking at the DPS values of those two, you can see you lose a huge amount of DPS going gimbaled. I don't really see the gimbaled weapons being that competitive, being that good of an option compared to how much damage you're leaving on the table. The only other thing I just want to mention when it comes to the sheet DPS is the plasma charger at the bottom, which is listed at 8 DPS, which might seem very low, but keep in mind that this thing does absolute damage. That means it ignores all resistance. In the shot speed here, again, with the short ranges we are going to be fighting with the fighter, at least the way I see them being most effective is up close and personal. I don't see the shot speed being that big of an issue. Now, if we go through the weapons here, the beam lasers and pulse lasers, they do have a high capacitor draw. They do empty that capacitor very, very quickly. That means you're not going to be firing for very long, and you need to keep a lot of pips over to your weapons in order to keep firing. So I see these weapons working best as like a zoom past and do some damage before you get away. And again, if we look at the pulse lasers, I put in the note that they have jitter. That means the shot's going to be like all over the place, even if you use a fixed weapon. Now, it's a small jitter. On the fixed one, it's a 0.75 degrees jitter, so it's not that bad. It's definitely noticeable when you fly, but again, with the same mantras we talked about, stay close to whatever you're shooting at, then the jitter shouldn't be a huge issue. None of the standard weapons, that would be the plasma repeater, the multi-cannons, or any of the lasers, use any ammo. Well, the multi-cannon, the plasma repeater, they do have a magazine that can be emptied, and after that's emptied, they have a 1-second reload to reload the magazine. They never actually run out of ammo, meaning you can keep on firing. Not so much with the AX multi-cannon. Now, the AX multi-cannon, which is only available on the AX fighter, does use ammo. You can restock the ammo by docking the fighter with the mothership. That will replenish the ammo and then launching it again. Alternatively, you can synthesize. However, synthesizing does require Guardian weapon parts, which isn't the easiest thing in the world to find. I really wouldn't recommend relying on synthesis unless you absolutely had to. When it comes to the 3 Guardian weapons, the shard launcher, the gauge projector, and the plasma charger, the shard launcher is like a frag cannon. It shoots out small balls of energy in a small cone at 5 degrees. So the jitter is just the size of the cone for these shots. So this is, again, like a frag cannon. It's up close and personal. We can also see the damage output of this is massive. If you can keep this thing on target and you can get all the shots to hit, this thing will hurt, and will hurt a lot. This does use ammo, and it is also able to run out of ammo. That means you will, from time to time, have to go back with the fighter, dock it with the mothership, and then launch it again in order to replenish the ammo, and this ammo cannot be synthesized. So if you're out, you have to dock. The gauge projector is like a railgun, pretty much the same mechanic. Hold in the trigger, it charges up. When the weapon is fully charged, this shot falls. And again, this one also uses ammo with 80 shots, so much like a pretty much a standard gauge rifle. And same deal here, can't be synthesized, you have to go back. Now the plasma charger, it might sound like a Guardian version of a plasma repeater, but it's actually closer to a beam laser in the way it works. It is slightly different though. First of all, you can see it has a shot speed, so it is actual shots that are being fired. However, it doesn't have any ammo, and it drains energy much in the same way as a beam laser does. It differs from a beam laser in the way that it has a charge-up time. That means you pull in the trigger, there's a small charge-up time. When the charge-up time is done, it then begins to fire, and from that point it kind of works like a plasma repeater, firing fairly rapidly But again, it also has the energy drain of a beam laser, so it definitely runs out of energy very quickly. And when it runs out of energy, it stops firing, and that means you need to recharge the energy in your capacitor and go through that charge up time again. But it does have that little extra benefit of doing absolute damage. That means it ignores all resistances on the target you're shooting at. Next, let's combine the fighter hulls with the weapon options. Not every weapon is available on every single fighter. And you can see here what weapons are available, and in the schema you can also see what utility mount they get, because that also varies from fighter to fighter. So for instance, the fixed beam laser is only available on the GU-97 and the Taipan. It's only available with a heatsink. This is important because while the beam lasers and the pulse lasers for that matter does empty its capacitor very quickly, as soon as you fire a heatsink, they stop charging energy from the capacitor. This means that you can actually extend the firing time quite significantly, but you don't have infinite heat sinks. You have 4 charges of the heat sink just as you have on a normal heat sink. So keep that in mind, that you can't just keep on firing it forever. And again, those heat sinks of the fighter, they can't be synthesized. So when you're out, and you have to go back and dock to get new ones. The same goes for the gimbal beam laser, which is available on all 3 variants with a heat sink. If we look at the fixed pulse laser, we can see we get that on the Condor with a heatsink or with a point defense on the GU-97 or the Taipan. Notice the little asterisk there. That means that it is fitted to the Aegis version of the fighter. Recall, that's the version of the fighter that is slightly faster and slightly more maneuverable. And it's worth noting that when fitted to the Aegis fighter, the weapons also do a slight amount of extra damage. It's not a lot, but it's a small amount. That means a fixed pulse laser on a GU-97 or Taipan does more damage than it does on a Condor. The main difference, of course, is that you get that point defense compared to a heatsink. Again, this is a matter of personal preference, what you prefer. Do you want to have that heatsink so you can fire your beams for longer when they begin to overheat, which they will, or do you want that extra defense that you get in the point defense? The gimbal pulse laser is available on all 3 variants with a chaff launcher. The multi-cannon, not the AX multi-cannon, the normal multi-cannon is then only available on the Condor. The plasma repeater is available on all 3 variants. It's available on the default GU-97 and Taipan with a chaff launcher or with a point defense on the Condor. The AX fighter, of course, is only available in the Taipan variants as we saw before, and it comes with the AX multi-cannon as the only option without any utility slots. And finally, we have the 3 Guardian fighters, the Trident, the Javelin, and the Lance, which comes with a shard launcher on the Javelin, a gauge projector on the Lance, and a plasma charger on the Trident. And again, these comes without any special utility mounts. Now, so this was the objective part of the video where we go with the hard stats. Next, I'm going to go into the more subjective side of it, where I'm going to go over my personal preferences and why I have chosen the way I have. From here on into the video, you might not agree with my points of view, but I want to share them with you anyway. Now, if we go back and we look at the weapons, the gimbaled beam and pulse lasers, from my point of view, is just out of the question. They do way too little damage. It's way too much to put on the table for just having gimbaled weapons. And I'm not a big fan of the fixed variants of those weapons either, simply because of the high capacitor draw, meaning they do empty the capacitor very quickly. I've been trying to fly with them, and in multiple situations I was like, I could keep my target in front of me, but I couldn't fire because I have to sit and wait for the weapons to recharge so I could fire again. The multi-cannon, I think, is really good. It has a very little capacitor draw, so you can keep firing it for quite long. And the same with the plasma repeater. You might expect that to have a high draw as well, but it actually doesn't. It's not too bad. A little bit mitigated by having that 1 second reload, but again, it's 1 second. It's really not that long. The AX multi-cannon is, of course, out of the question. I'm mainly going to be using a fighter for bounty hunting, and therefore I will not be using the AX fighter. So for me, again, that's out of the question as well. The Guardian weapons are a little specialized. The shard launcher, I feel like, can be very, very strong if you're flying the fighter as a player. Of course, you have the option to either fly as a player or fly the fighter with your NPC crew member. And I feel like the shard launcher can be a very strong option if you're flying the ship as a player. I don't know if it's just because my NPC crew member doesn't have enough combat skill yet, a combat rank yet, but I feel like losing quite a bit of damage when using the shard launcher. It doesn't get the shots in as quickly as a wound and maybe shoot from a little bit too far away, so not all the shots actually hit the target, lowering the effective DPS quite significantly. And the fact that it uses ammo, again, not a huge fan of that. Plasma Charger, of course, does not use any ammo, but it has that very, very high capacitor draw that we also saw on the beam lasers and the pulse lasers, so I'm not really a big fan of it for the same reason as that, so I'm probably going to take that out as well. But my favorite weapons amongst the Guardian ones, I think, is the Gauge Projector. They can work very well, the damage output is pretty good, work well as a player, and the NPCs does have that Mark 1 eyeball, meaning they are very, very good to hit with these hit scan weapons. You've tried it yourself. You've been fighting a high-skilled NPCs, elite NPCs with ghost rifles. They seem to hit every single shot, no matter how maneuverable you try to be. The same with the crew members. As their combat rank goes up, they become better and better at hitting with these hit scan weapons. So therefore, I think my personal preference amongst the Guardian fighters are the Ghost Projector. Maybe the shard launcher can work, but I'm a little bit more meh about that. So this leaves me with a few recommendations. If you feel like you're a little short on kinetic damage, I would recommend going with a Condor with a fixed multi-cannon. However, if you want some extra thermals, I would go for something with like a plasma repeater. I would prefer to have the chaff, but if you don't care whether you have point defense or chaff, I would say go with the point defense on the Condor for that little bit extra damage, the extra maneuverability. Alternatively, if you want a more defensive build, less damage, slightly less damage I should say, but way more defensive, then go for the fixed plasma repeater on the Taipan. Again, it's slower, but it's heavier armored and it has that chaff that's going to be able to mitigate damage even more. So that's a very defensive build, going with the plasma repeater on the Taipan. And the only other option that I really see as a good choice is the Gauge Projector on GX9 Lance. Now, these are just my personal preferences, but do let me know in the comment section what combination of fighters and weapons you prefer and why. Now, I've spent a little bit extra time on this video, which I really hope does show, and I would really much appreciate if you would go down and give the video a like and maybe even subscribing to the channel. If you want to support my work, of course, there is also Patreon. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and until next time, I will see you guys in space.